Okay, we'll call the work session to order. And the first item is, let's see if any council members have questions about the order of agenda or questions about anything that's on the consent agenda. Do we have anything?
No.
No? Okay. Are there any councilor concerns?
I think I got handled with Brian. It was on the psilocybin, the mushroom. Psilocybin. I still said it wrong. Psilocybin, thank you. Legislation, and I don't, maybe you can tell, maybe other councilors also had a concern about it, and you would just say what your thoughts were regarding, we have it on legislation. I know Malala, other cities are taking it up, but they're not. Wilsonville, it's a different part of the county. I don't know if you could expand on that.
Well, we did look into it. No city in the metro region, excluding Malala, is doing anything on it. I think everybody's taking a wait and see approach, but the rules for those facilities are so strict, the odds of one ending up in Wilsonville are extremely low.
Okay.
I think it's more of a county issue.
Okay.
But kind of see how things shake out going forward.
Okay.
And there is something, right, on the ballot,
on
the Clackamas County.
Clackamas County ballot.
It's like to delay or temporarily halt, postpone or something, yeah, the facilities, yeah.
Okay. Good. So the first item on our work session agenda is City Council presentation on the 2022 Urban Renewal Strategic Plan. And Mr. Lorenzen has a presentation, I believe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, that's not it. Okay. There we go. Thanks for your patience. Yes, for the record, my name is Matt Lorenzen, and I am the city's economic development manager. It's my pleasure to speak with you this evening about our work to develop an urban renewal strategic plan, or rather a new urban renewal strategic plan. The city has been operating with a plan that was adopted in 2014, and during the council's most recent goal setting, it was determined that it was time for a new plan. I'll start by thanking Councilor Ockervall for her time and attention in chairing this committee, the Urban Renewal Task Force, which I will tell you a little bit more about in a moment, and the work that we completed. I will also welcome at this time Elaine Howard with Elaine Howard Consulting, who worked with staff and the Urban Renewal Task Force throughout the roughly 6-month process to develop the plan that I'll present tonight. Elaine was also joined by Nick Papanuk of Tiberius Solutions, who also consulted on the project primarily with the all of the financials and number crunching that goes into tax increment finance. So with that, I'll start out with just brief comments, a little bit just about good development and why we use tax increment finance. And I'll start with a quote from Ed McMahon here, not the Ed McMahon that some of you may know from a couple generations, maybe just one generation past. He says, for communities, there's really only two kinds of change. There's planned change and there's unplanned change. And to Wilsonville's great credit, I think Wilsonville is recognized as a leader in the region for being a city that plans. And this strategic plan is certainly in line with the city's tradition of planning, and will, I think, do a good job in helping to implement the other plans, adopted plans of the city. Mr. McMahon goes on to say that change can be done to you or it can be done by you, and we get to choose that. The state of Oregon does compel us to plan, and to that end, we meet a minimum standard, but it's things like public investments, incentive programs, and well-thought-out regulations that help us to create the future that our visionary adopted plans and what the community wants to see. So urban renewal, also known as tax increment finance, is one of the few tools that we use in the state of Oregon that we can use to shape the future or pave the road to the future, in some cases quite literally. About 6 months ago in March, we convened the Urban Renewal Task Force, which has been convened in the past several times to address various topics. Most recently, before this planning exercise, they were convened to do work to create the WIN, Wilsonville Investment Now Economic Development Incentive Program. And we gathered a very similar group of individuals representing a broad variety of stakeholders in the community to bring a unique perspective depending on their background or experience or expertise. And they were assisted throughout this process, and the meetings were led by staff. That included me, but that also included other staff members, and I do just want to pause to recognize the engineering division, the planning division, the finance department, who all lent great expertise to bring this plan to fruition as well. This map shows our existing urban renewal areas. There are 4, the west side, the east side, which is formerly known as the Year 2000 plan, the Coffee Creek urban renewal area, and then you see, if you very carefully look, the Twist WIN urban renewal area. This exercise in planning is timely, as I think you're aware. The West Side Plan and the Year 2000 Plan are imminently closing for a couple of reasons. One, they're reaching their maximum indebtedness, and 2, they've completed the most critical and highly prioritized projects that were identified in the governing plans for those areas. It's timely as well because with these 2 areas sunsetting or closing, choose your terminology, because in the state of Oregon, no more than 25% of acreage or 25% of assessed value can be captured within an urban renewal area. That means when these 2 areas close, it creates an opportunity for the city to determine if there are new areas the city would like to use tax increment finance in to implement plans or otherwise cure blight, as the term goes in Oregon statutes. Just by way of reference, I will note that as far as that 25% threshold goes, even with these plans in place, the city's only at 5.31% of assessed value. That's within an urban renewal area. And then as far as acreage, a little closer at 22.65%. So when these 2 larger areas close, it will again, as I noted, create the opportunity to expand into a new area if so desired. I want to leave at least 15 minutes for questions and discussion of the plan that I hope you've had an opportunity to go through. But before we do that, I'll just briefly summarize the recommendations that are being made by the task force in the proposed urban renewal strategic plan. The Year 2000 plan is proposed and recommended to close this fiscal year, and then followed directly thereafter by the West Side Plan, closing in fiscal year 23 and 24. That's, again, due to reaching maximum indebtedness and completion of projects. So there's essentially nowhere to go with those 2 plans at this point. There was some discussion among the task force members about whether it makes sense to prolong the sunsetting timeline in order to ease impact on, for example, the school district who experiences some financial impact from the phenomenon called compression, which is a result of the separation of taxes through urban renewal. But in consultation with the school district and discussion among the task force members, it was recommended that we stick to the timelines that you see in the plan. Regarding the Coffee Creek area, in large part, the recommendation is to proceed as was identified in the original plan that was adopted, with two exceptions. Ritter Road, in order to support development in the Coffee Creek area, the task force is recommending to add improvements to Ritter Road up to city standards to support industrial development. And then a more complicated one that we spent considerable time discussing was this idea of property acquisition and disposition. And I might also add in there just real estate activities in general, whether that be purchasing options or doing other related work to try and influence property. And let me just speak to that point a little bit more if I can by showing the map on the screen. This is a map that I put together a few months back to demonstrate ownership within the Coffee Creek industrial area. And you can see it's quite a rainbow, which means that this is not all owned by one or two parties. The ownership is disparate, their motivations are disparate, their timelines for sale are disparate, and sometimes when you have oddly configured lots that may have topographical changes or oddly shaped boundaries or any number of challenges, the private development community may not be interested in such a either small-sized or difficult lot unless it's aggregated with a larger site. And so the idea here with the Urban Renewal Agency potentially becoming more involved with property acquisition and disposition is not to play the role of developer, but rather to help with this ongoing challenge that we've faced in Coffee Creek, and that is site aggregation. To be able to put together and assemble a site that then becomes attractive to the development community. So we wouldn't step in and do anything in this area A until we've studied it further, and it's really been vetted through the Urban Renewal Task Force and through the City Council. But again, it would be opportunistic and driven by need rather than the city proactively going out and again playing the role of developer. So we discussed this at length. There was some concern among task force members about whether or not this was the appropriate role of government. I noted that in many other jurisdictions, this is pretty common practice among urban renewal agencies to be proactive in preparing difficult sites for development. And not that that alone is sufficient rationale, but when we discussed that this would be driven by need and by opportunity and not by the city trying to compete with private development. And Councilor Ockervall can certainly share her perspective or anything that I'm missing here, but at that point it was determined that yes, we could at least study this further and put it into the plan for consideration.
And I believe we have a question here from Councilor West. Is that okay if we interject questions? Or okay.
So when you say site development, can you expand on that a little bit? Like you're not going to like put in the industry, right? Like we're not going to be land, property owners necessarily, but what is that? Can you break down what that, when you say aggregate site development, can you break that down just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if we were to take one example, let's say, is my mouse showing up? It is. There's this little triangle here. Let's say that this little triangle becomes for sale.
Okay.
It looks like it's owned by someone who owns the adjacent properties as well, but we're going through a thought exercise right now.
Right.
The development community is probably not going to be interested in that site alone due to its odd shape and its small size.
And its location and, right.
Yeah. But if we look at adjacent properties there, you add that all together and you've probably got an 8-acre site, which would be attractive. So rather than see that property, for example, stay within Washington County jurisdiction where they have different zoning and land use codes, which have also been problematic for seeing development in this area, rather than see it transferred to a new owner who may establish a new use or a new residence, the city would be able to buy and hold that piece of property until the property next door is for sale, and then it could be aggregated with that piece and passed on to a new owner for development.
Could we be stuck with little parcels that for long, long periods of time until the market kind of allows it to be sold with another piece? Or do we have any, what guarantees do we have that that other adjacent property per se might become available, or be just holding property?
Yeah, I think that's a fair concern, and that's why before the city entered into any transaction, you know, it would need to be vetted fully, and the risks would need to be assessed at that time. So, but yes, that certainly is a possibility, and we wouldn't want to put ourselves in that position. So, okay. And then as far as the project cost and the maximum indebtedness of the plan, there's a recognition that with inflation going the way that it is, there's likely a need to update the project costs in the plan and therefore the maximum indebtedness, but that was not seen as an urgent need. As development happens, as the increment increases, we'd address that in time is the recommendation. Quickly on the WIN program, folks on the task force really thought it was important to reward, I guess I'll say, long-term businesses in the Wilsonville community and not cap off the amount of points that they could earn under the program for their business tenure. So right now they're capped, I think, at 4 points. The recommendation is to remove that cap and to allow for a higher score for long-standing Wilsonville businesses. And then there was some discussion as well about during the twist process how it got a little shaky at one point as the application progressed through the approval process, and maybe some questions that the community hadn't been addressed early enough. And so the task force is recommending that we adjust the rules of the program to allow for sort of a public vetting process of the applicant before it proceeds in through the process of creating the zone for the business. New uses of urban renewal. I'll spare this slide and just say that there's considerable energy around sort of 3 key areas, with one leading highest above the others, and you can guess. The task force is very energetic and supports the formation of a new urban renewal area to support the implementation of the town center plan. Furthermore, they've been briefed on the town center infrastructure funding plan, which Senior Planner Kim Reibold will be presenting just behind me in this work session, and they understand that plan and its components, and would like to see urban renewal as a top leading candidate to support the funding for the infrastructure needed in the town center. Housing affordability is something that we can chat a little bit here if you have more questions. It's a little bit vague at this point, but that's somewhat intentional. We recognize that there are, we're having a concurrent conversation, for example, around construction excise tax. We're talking about other options that may lead to greater housing equity and housing affordability and attainability in the city. And so the recommendation of the task force here is not go forth and create a program necessarily, but to include urban renewal as a consideration and a tool that we can add to the toolbox to achieve greater housing affordability. And then finally, the Basalt Creek industrial area. This would be north of the Coffee Creek industrial area. And again, while the planning in that area is still in its conceptual phase, as that planning process advances to refine zoning, more refined planning around transportation and infrastructure, again, the task force expressed support for the use of tax increment finance in the Basalt Creek industrial area, similar to what has been done in Coffee Creek. So now is a great time to, I guess, engage in a conversation and take whatever questions you may have. But as far as next steps go, what we would look to do is ask for your revisions, if any, to the plan as it's been presented tonight and as you have it in your packet, and then use this next month to make those revisions and bring it back to the council on the meeting of the 21st for formal adoption. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and ask for what questions you may have.
Let my fellow counselors think on that for a moment, but also wanted to mention, in case we do have some of our task force members listening into the meeting tonight on Zoom or come back to the recording of it, from my perspective, the task force was just incredibly helpful in working through this plan revision, and I greatly appreciate everyone's participation in that process. We did have staff, as we reviewed kind of a draft of this plan in our final meeting with the task force. There was a couple small tweaks and edits and that resulted from that discussion. And then the revisions were sent back to the task force again for further comment prior to this evening. So they've been very close in the development of what we're having presented tonight, and I just really appreciate the input that we've gotten from them over the last several months. It's really been quite a rich discussion all the way along. So thank you so much for that. Do we have any questions or clarification that we'd like to have at this point? Do you have a comment that you'd like to make?
If there's
Maybe a
not,
comment?
that's okay, because I thought we have Elaine Howard joining us, and I hope it's okay if I put her on the spot for just a moment. Elaine has done considerable work in other communities across the state that would like to use tax increment finance toward housing affordability. And I thought maybe she might be able to briefly speak to what that has looked like and how she thinks maybe it might be relevant in Wilsonville. Elaine.
Sure, I can do that. I've worked with cities across the state. It seems all cities in Oregon are having housing affordability issues, and some are similar to yours and some are different. In Salem, we are working with them on a program similar to your WIN program, but to create affordable housing. So it's single property TIF areas where they are working with developers who come in for an application for market rate housing in the permit center, or if they know about it earlier, come to the city, and then the city works with them and says, well, if you'll create a certain percentage of your units as affordable housing, we can offer you a property tax rebate for an X period of time. So they have done that on one property. That property is constructed. They are talking to 4 different developers for other properties right now to further expand that program. So that is an interesting way to be able to provide. That is for rental housing. It's not for home ownership of housing. In other communities, we've worked with Burns and John Day and Madras on programs to help single-family housing production and affordability. And those are also programs where we have looked at tax rebates for certain price points of housing to be developed, but we have also implemented repaying system development charges to the developer if they will develop housing at a certain price point, and then also added the ability to help with infrastructure improvements. So if the developer is required to do specific improvements or even offsite improvements to allow them to do development, let's say to a larger subdivision, the urban renewal area could provide some of those improvements as part of the development of either just market rate housing or more affordable housing. So we've worked with communities on different ideas, really depending on what their needs are and what they are willing to put on the table in terms of other programs that the city might have to pair with the urban renewal. And so when we were talking about this with the task force, we knew that you were talking about the construction excise tax or potentially other methods of helping to deal with housing affordability. And the task force was very interested in how urban renewal could be used to pair with other areas that the city might look at, not as a sole funding tool, but maybe pairing with other funding tools.
That's good. A question from Councilor West.
Thank you, Ms. Howard, for sharing those ideas. Those are great. I have a clarification on the tax rebate. Are they going to the developer, the landlord in those rental cases? Where are we seeing that those funds? I'm just curious where they're using those funds. And is there any program that anybody's doing anymore where the tax abatement goes to the new homeowner, to where they have to pay only property taxes on the land and not the new assessed value once the property is built, so they pay a lesser property tax amount to help control payment and monthly costs? Is there anything like that being done?
Those are great questions. I'll answer the first one first. On the large development of apartments and getting affordability there, the tax rebate goes to the developer, landlord, owner of the property, with the requirement that they keep X amount of units affordable over a certain time frame, so that rebate passes through to renters. On the homeowner one, the program in John Day is very flexible, and it could go to a homeowner. So if someone bought a lot, a piece of property, and built a house, and it's a homeowner who's doing that, hiring a general contractor, they could get that property tax rebate just for the creation of new housing. John Day's problem was no housing was being created at all, and employers such as their hospital, which is the largest employer in the city, couldn't hire new employees because there was no place for them to live. People could not find any housing to come in as a new citizen, new resident to the community. So their program can be used specifically for homeowners also. The ones in Burns and Madras could be used that way, but they were more designed with the intent of just creating new housing and working with developers who are developing larger tracts or a subdivision that might have 10 homes or 15 homes, so that you could get a number of homes developed instead of just doing single properties. The John Day one was specifically just trying to get any housing developed.
Is there a possibility, are you hearing anything that where the first-time home buyer gets into a brand new home and they basically pay no increased property taxes, but as if it was just a raw lot? And so 10 years later, maybe that will go back to the new assessed values, but they get like the homeowner gets like a 10-year abatement or something like that, that allows them to kind of like get on their feet, be a homeowner, have less expense. Because I think our goal has been focused on home ownership for first-time home buyers, getting those people to kind of climb that economic ladder. So I'm kind of seeing if there's a way you can be creative to entice that demographic.
You can do that for new construction. So if you're in an area of the city that is developing and you were working with a builder and they were able to qualify a first-time homeowner to a program that you would set up, you could do that. You would have to use other tools, because just the property tax amount, given the home prices in Wilsonville, would not be enough to lower your overall average cost of housing to meet it depends on what threshold, I guess, but for most first-time homeowners, they need to be in a lower price point than what you have. So you would have to pair that with other tools to help lower that price point to a price point that is more affordable.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Lehan.
I'll just say a couple things. One of the issues that I'm always thinking about with regards to tax rebates or property tax rebates or any kind of tax rebates is whose taxes are going up, because somebody's got to cover it. And even if that people are just going to pay for the bare land cost, but now there's a house, now you presumably have additional kids in the schools, cars on the street. You need the services that property taxes pay for, and if you're not carrying them, somebody else is going to have to carry them, or else quality of service will decline. I mean, it's a balloon kind of thing. Goes in one side, it's going to come out the other side, and over time tends to get more. Inequities tend to increase, but with a lot of property tax rebate systems. So I'm sure there are some that think through those things enough, but it's not a panacea. You have to look at all the downstream impacts. I was going to mention also that back on the aggregation issue, the city has done that multiple times, but one of the ones I remember was, probably Chris was here, was when we bought the post office. And that was behind Lowry's and in front of where Albertsons, well, now it's not Albertsons. Things change really fast. But it was sandwiched between the grade school and the old Lowry's, and there was a post office there, and we bought it for just that reason, because we figured because the school was going to be closing before long, and Lowry's was going to redevelop within 5 or 6 years, and we didn't want that little piece stuck in the middle to dictate the development opportunities for the whole much larger piece, and that worked out really well. We sat on that for, how long did we sit on that? 10 years, I don't know, a while. But it made the development of the piece a lot more attractive eventually. So that's not a new thing for the city. And I guess that's the only comments I was thinking of right at the moment.
Oh, thank you. And Ms. Howard, did you have a comment to add? I saw the hand go up and...
Well, I then looked at the time and knew we were supposed to be done at 5:30, so I didn't know whether you want me to add additional content or just move to your next item.
Well, we do need to be mindful of our schedule, but do you think you have like a 2-sentence comment, or should we?
Sure.
Okay, great.
One comment is if you develop new housing and you have new students, your schools get paid on a per pupil basis for actual instruction. So they get additional money through the state school fund. That doesn't account for having to build new schools like you did in Villebois, of course. So, and that's typically done through general obligation bonds to build new schools. So new housing is generally good for school districts. And then just the second one on services, I think that's a really great point. If you're doing tax rebates, nobody's paying the taxes, and how are you providing the services? I'm working with the city of Hermiston on a large new development, really on the scale of Villebois. And one of the things that they are doing is having the developer pay a fee to the fire district on a per home basis until revenue sharing kicks in, and we can talk about that at some other time. That one's more complicated. But they are also having the developer pay a fee for future transportation improvements above what their permits would be. So they have looked at other ways to make the developer provide some additional money up front and then be able to use urban renewal to help provide that lower cost workforce housing within the area.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for this presentation. It looks like we'll see you again next month when the plan comes up in our public meeting, our regular scheduled meeting on the 21st. And this topic flows really nicely into our next topic, actually, looking at town centers. So thank you again. Appreciate that. And I'll call up, let's see, No, yes, that's right. Okay, Ms. Ry, I got ahead of myself on the agenda here. Ms. Rybold and crew? Yes? Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome. And we're going to be talking about Town Center Infrastructure Funding Plan.
All right, good evening. I'm just going to take a moment here to pull up the slideshow. All right, great. My name is Kimberly Rybold. I am senior planner here with the city, and I'm excited to introduce to you another implementation activity from the Town Center Plan, which the city adopted in 2019. This was a plan that looked at the future of Town Center and how we want to see it grow and evolve. One of the key elements of that planning process was looking at improved connectivity, both from a vehicular standpoint, but more importantly, from a multimodal standpoint to create a good sense of place. So part of this, there is an infrastructure, a list of infrastructure activities that were adopted as part of that plan. That ranges from a new Main Street planned as really the centerpiece of the town center, along with other smaller improvements like cycle tracks, connecting the open spaces within the town center, enhanced crossings along Wilsonville Road. And so one of the implementation activities from the town center plan was looking at a funding plan to really set in place a framework for how we can pay for these infrastructure funding projects, considering a lot of these are going to be improvements that aren't just funded by development, but will need to be funded by the city as well. So to begin that process, we had a partnership with FCS Group, and that effort has been led by Todd Chase over the past 6 months or so to look at a refinement of these infrastructure costs, as well as to look at what some potential funding tools could be to pay for these projects in the future. So the intent of this plan is to really set that framework for some actions that we can begin to take over the next several years to be able to start funding and then creating these improvements. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd, and he is going to walk you through some of our initial findings from this work, which we have done in collaboration with the Planning Division, Engineering Division, Finance, and Economic Development. So it's been a real team effort on our end. So Todd, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. My name's Todd Chase. I'm a principal economist with FCS Group. And we work all over the West and even parts of Canada on mostly implementation of infrastructure funding strategies, town centers, waterfront redevelopment plans. So we see a lot. And I'm glad Elaine was on earlier because I've been working with her on that Hermiston project for the last few months. So we've been working in Wilsonville off and on for about 3 decades now on various projects, so very familiar with the city. The purpose of this effort was to take the wonderful town center plan you've developed over the last probably 5 years or so, and to look at current market trends that might shape the phasing of new development there. work with the engineering team here, and we brought on David Evans Associates to provide another third-party opinion on costs of infrastructure and update those public facility costs that were included in the town center master plan that were draft. Look at existing and potential funding sources, evaluate those with this advisory committee that Kim mentioned, perform a preliminary urban renewal analysis to figure out how much indebtedness that could take on potentially as it develops, and to come up with this draft funding plan we're going to present tonight. And we call it draft because this is your opportunity to really help us fine-tune some of the assumptions and recommendations as we move forward. Next slide, please. This slide shows the town center improvements. And a lot of those improvements are gateway improvements along Wilsonville Road. Then you have some new interior roadways that are going to be basically green streets with some nice biofilters and landscaping treatments along those. Those are shown in yellow. And you have some bicycle pedestrian dedicated facilities shown there in pink. And you have some linear parks and a skate park shown in green. Quite a few amenities and investments, system-wide improvements that will not only benefit the town center development and redevelopment, but the entire city as a whole. Now, the costs of building all that came to about $90 million when you look at all the different cost elements there. As we pull out some of the privately funded facilities for stormwater, you can see the total remaining costs come to about $82 million. And the bulk of those are in the transportation components, and that's about $54 million, followed by the sewer upgrades and water, about $9 million each for those. Then we have stormwater improvements, about $7 to $8 million improvements there for the retrofit facilities, and parks, about $1 million of investment for the parks, primarily that skate park I was talking about. What we do with these types of evaluations is we first look at your current system of charges that are in place and adopted today. And the City Council has already adopted a set of charges for next year for system development charges, so we've assumed those charges will apply to the future development that occurs. And not that all that SDC revenue needs to be spent in the town center. Usually that gets spent anywhere around the city that needs funding for system development improvements. But we like to compare what that town center will bring in terms of revenues compared to all these public facility costs that are associated with it directly. And the difference is what we call a gap. And the gap, in this case, for the first 25 years is pretty significant. As the town center develops, and it'll likely take more than 25 years to fully redevelop, the gap is narrowed considerably. But we like to focus on the first 25 years because you typically need this public investment before or just before the development occurs. So it's like a seed to get the catalyst of development to occur. So we tend to focus on the first 25 years, and that gap is primarily in transportation and stormwater, followed by sanitary sewer. The parks and water system funding overall looks like it'll balance itself out over time, and town center can contribute to the rest of the city's needs there. But in terms of transportation, we have a significant gap of about $32 million in today's dollars, and another significant gap for stormwater, primarily these green streets, which tend to cost a little more than a typical street, of about $7 million. The sanitary sewer system tends to work itself out over time, for a longer period of time, where rates combined with system development charges will probably help that balance out with some interim financing that the city could provide, or grants or loans you could obtain. So our real focus has been, in this project, geared towards transportation, and the stormwater gap. Now, we did not look at the cost of a public parking facility. I know that's part of the town center plan, but that would, of course, be over and above these costs, and those tend to be funded either through a GO bond, voter approved sometimes, or through urban renewal funding. That's what the city of Bend did for their downtown parking garage. And so that's a little bit on the side, so we'll come back to that at a future time. But we're going to focus on the critical infrastructure to serve the first wave of development on the town center, which is primarily transportation and stormwater. In looking at your funding sources, you have existing citywide system development charges, or known as impact fees, where only new development that increases capacity and demand on the system pays into that. Existing development doesn't pay into the system development charges. You have existing utility rates for water and sewer, and even stormwater, which will generate some funds. And then besides that, we have to look at new funding sources, new being things that might need to be adopted in the coming years. And that could include a new urban renewal area, as Matt was mentioning, as you retire the other districts. As you rethink your citywide system development charges, especially for transportation and parks, we could look at those project lists and include some of these elements that I mentioned on a previous slide. That might increase, or depending on how much development we're going to see citywide, change your overall citywide SDC charges. But we can look at that holistically citywide. You can consider a local improvement district, which tends to focus really on the local improvements just needed for the town center, and they tend to be paid for just by the existing development or future development in the town center. So it's very limited to the town center area. New special assessments can be considered, whether through a business license fee in the town center or a parking fee based on surface parking in the town center. That could generate revenue. And a new utility rate surcharge, we've done that in other communities. On top of your base fee, they would pay a surcharge just to cover some of the improvements listed on that map. One or two, probably, not the whole list of improvements, just a couple of catalyst improvements. Development agreements have been used for advanced financing by the private sector to advance and build a new roadway, perhaps, or something like that, and the city would then compensate that developer back through some of these other charges mentioned above. There's a number of financing sources on top or on the bottom of this chart, which can be used as an interim source of financing that gets paid back through the mix of funding techniques listed on the top half of that slide. One way to evaluate all these different funding techniques is to have a number of criteria that we developed with the advisory committee. Criteria included near-term funding potential, long-term funding potential, the flexibility of a particular funding source, whether it only can be used for certain types of improvements, or is it more flexible to be used for multiple improvements, implementation issues in terms of costs to implement a certain technique, ongoing administrative costs to city staff in terms of collecting revenue and administering the new funding technique, and general market acceptance. Will the property owners, developers be receptive of a certain funding technique over another? And housing cost impacts. Will the funding technique result in an extraordinary development cost that would be passed on to homeowners? Rated those from most negative to positive for each technique, and we came up with a preliminary ranking based on that, unweighted. But what came out of this on the top of the list was the urban renewal area with probably the greatest funding potential for tax increment financing, as well as most flexibility and highest level of market acceptance. and least impact to direct homeowner costs, followed by citywide system development charge updates, particularly for transportation and maybe parks. And then down the list, utility fee surcharges, primarily for the stormwater costs of the town center, which tends to be for that local area only. We need some sort of interim financing vehicle. That could be a city bond or debt issuance. Does not have to be voter approved if it's a limited GO bond and within your capacity, but it would certainly require some additional analysis to make sure you have adequate revenue to pay off those bonds other than general funds, and using the above revenue sources that's possible. Another type of special assessment could be conducted for stormwater or general assessment for the area for gateway treatments. That could be done through a business license fee surcharge or a parking surcharge as well. So those are the top ranking candidates. And then as we dove a little bit deeper into the urban renewal area just to understand the potential, you would certainly have to conduct a more formal urban renewal financial analysis and planning document, feasibility study, if you do go down this road. But what we wanted to do was to say, okay, if we create a benefit area shown in orange on that map, and it primarily includes the town center north of Wilsonville Road, but it does benefit some of the properties south of Wilsonville Road to a degree because they're directly tied into it. They are potentially or almost fully built out in terms of what we expect to see on the south side, but it does add to your current level of existing assessed value base, which helps generate revenue for the town center down the road. We looked at that area. We assumed a 30-year time frame, so not full build out of the town center. We did take into account your vertical housing tax abatement program, which resulted in a 18 to 22% reduction in taxes those properties would probably pay depending on the level of development. So it's a great benefit to the property owners to take advantage of that. And hopefully they will in the near term. We found their existing AV in that area to be $174 million based on county assessor records, and the potential to more than double that over 30 years based on the level of development we think is very likely, to about another $230 million after abatement is taken into account. So significant potential for net new AV creation in town center, which works well for any kind of a tax increment financing district. Next slide. When we took this into account, we discounted it back to today's dollars over a 30-year time frame, and we found a potential maximum indebtedness of about close to 42 million before revenue sharing occurs. Revenue sharing would be dependent on the amount of actual indebtedness the town center plan adopts. So the actual amount of potential debt for the town center would likely be less than $40 million, but it does show a lot of potential. Once the town center urban renewal plan sunsets, it would result in kind of a windfall for the existing taxing districts or a commensurate reduction in overall tax rates, depending on where you are with regard to compression at that time. We feel that this analysis is pretty conservative, tried to keep it that way, but it does assume a significant amount of development, probably 1,600 potential apartments added to the town center over 30 years. And as we did this work, we began to summarize what might be considered to be short-term and midterm actions the city could take. Short-term actions in the next year or two would include accepting this town center plan as a basis and a framework to move forward with some of the recommendations contained in it. We would then move forward or recommend the city move forward with a citywide transportation system development charge methodology update. I know you're doing that, or it's underway now for parks, and we're helping you on that effort. But transportation would also want to be conducted as well. And that would give you the opportunity to include some of these larger projects in the overall transportation STC methodology. If you do close out the existing urban renewal districts, as was Matt recommended in your strategy there, that would open up the opportunity to create a new town center urban renewal plan, which you could then begin to implement in the midterm, 3 to 4 years, and also consider some of the near-term catalyst improvements for water and sewer. Most of that could probably be conducted with interfund loans or low-interest loans from Business Oregon. And then as you look at the big gaps for stormwater, we would also want to have some stakeholder outreach to consider some special funding for that, which could be a special assessment for, say, surface parking in the town center today, which might be inducement to redevelop some of those large surface parking lots in the near term. And a small assessment of about $6 per month per space would probably be enough to amortize about $2 million in near-term catalyst stormwater improvement projects that would benefit the property owners directly. So those are all just a handful of near-term recommendations that could come out of this town center funding strategy.
Great. I'm going to turn it over for questions now from council. Councilor Lehan?
Yes, I was I didn't quite catch it. You had mentioned parking surcharge earlier, and so then this was or went by it pretty quick, and then you said in the end that $6 per stall a month would be charged to the property owner?
Could be. It could be in the form of a special assessment district in the area to help pay for some of the stormwater improvement projects that they would benefit from. It could be structured as many ways to structure it. Yeah.
The main thing that concerns me about this is that we're just not addressing a parking structure or even a future parking structure or how that would work into the plan, because I don't see how the plan works without it. So if we don't have a notion, even if it isn't going to be for a while, if you put would it be too hard to put your title slide back on that had the lovely picture, that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one. You see all those tall buildings and no parking lots? So the assumption is there's a parking structure in one of those things, I presume, because the on-street is nowhere near enough to accommodate those many floors.
Yeah. And there's a couple different ways to do that. City of Bend built a public parking structure using urban renewal money primarily, separate from where parking occurs in most of the downtown buildings. Lake Oswego
did too.
chose to put it as a public parking structure, but also allow some of that to go under existing development and around existing development. So it's part public, part private. And they used urban renewal funds for that as well. So I think urban renewal could go a long way to help solve that parking.
Yeah, I think urban renewal could also, similar to what Lake Oswego did. But in the plan, now would it be too hard to get back to the plan? The map, there. It seems like you have to have, or looking at this with the lovely artist rendering, you have to have an idea where that parking structure or perhaps structures are going to be located before you could ever hope to get that 4 or 5-story building, someone to commit to that building if it's nowhere near a parking structure. I mean, the parking structure itself, or even the thought of a future parking structure, is going to drive where those anchor buildings are going to go. Don't you think so?
Yeah, there likely will need to be at least one level of parking under all those tall buildings.
That they would have a level of parking under,
Oh, yeah.
under any building over 3 stories?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, in Vancouver, BC, they require them under all buildings. in a lot of,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how many stories you've got, which tends to push the stories up, because there you go. But yeah, you don't get to just add surface parking and build a squatty building.
Right. And if you don't have public-private partnerships for the parking, it could delay implementation of the town center. Private developers are going to need to wait until rents get so high that they can finally afford to build the parking.
Yeah, well, so anyway, my main concern with it is that we're too much pushing that off into the fairy dust world of someday there'll be a parking structure, but there doesn't seem to be a grip on 2 or 3 different ways that might occur.
Yeah.
But I
think
agree, urban renewal is the key, but anyway.
Well, and then can I follow on that question? I don't want to step in.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
So the 2 examples, and we might be getting into too detailed things right now, but the 2 examples that you gave in Lake Oswego, I believe, and Bend with their parking structure, that urban renewal was used in that. And if we're talking about perhaps urban renewal being a kind of a main lifter in this overall funding plan, I guess in Ben's funding plan or Lake Oswego's funding plan, was it a side thing or was it wrapped into the overall funding plan? Because I wouldn't want to lose our opportunity, I guess, to use urban renewal for such a type of project if it wasn't included in the funding plan. And, we decided to go that direction. Do you see what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
I believe a public parking structure was always part of those urban renewal plans to begin with. I'll just say that some cities, our main office is Redmond, Washington, and they built a town center with just a 2-level plaza, we call it, structure, which then supports all the development that the private sector built around it. And, they had a lot of surface parking, and it's slowly beginning to infill currently, just as Hood River has done. City of Hood River has a lot of surface parking that the city bought and uses for surface parking. Someday that hopefully will become a parking structure. It could take 20 years.
And I do want to quickly note, too, one of the other implementation strategies that we have outlined in the town center plan is a further parking study. That wasn't identified as one of the initial projects to undertake, but consideration of a parking structure would be part of that. One of the reasons why that wasn't necessarily identified as the first thing we would do as part of this implementation is because we know that right now there's a surplus of parking. And so I think there was a notion when we adopted the plan that type of study, you get development started and you see how things are shaping up and how those forms are taking place and, the ability of private development to accommodate parking on site versus, at some point there's going to be, as development occurs, the need to do something more. And so I think the intent is to look at that question a little more integrated into parking structure for the area as a whole. And so I think it's a good point, and something that, if we know potentially that urban renewal is an option, that there's going to be future study involved in that, and we can maybe think about what is the timing of looking at that overall parking strategy relative to the adoption of potentially an urban renewal plan for an urban renewal area.
Okay.
Excuse me, but that's the fear. That would be my fear, is it goes ahead and develops and we get more fries with their giant parking lot. We get nothing but surface parking, or anyone is afraid to build in there without a giant surface parking lot. And then you're committed to that for the next 30 years, which is, where we are now. If you don't at least even have painted a picture that here's where we're going eventually.
Right.
Otherwise, we'll just get that.
I have a question.
Thank you.
So,
Councilor West, yeah.
Thank you. Along the lines of this, is it, I just think of our town center, even that picture, it looks like a tiny Pearl district a little bit. And I know that a lot of the buildings, they do have a lot of, it's parking underground, elevator up into the building, right? That's pretty common, at least in the Pearl. I'm sure other jurisdictions have that. Is that wildly more expensive than having a standalone free parking structure when you go subterranean?
It is. It is. And the Pearl did use urban renewal as well to help build the subterranean parking under multiple blocks, and then public-private agreements to build over it. So it is more expensive, but the lowest cost form of structured parking is the one-level plaza that I mentioned. That's about half the price of a 3 or 4 level plaza, and then going underground is at least 50% more than the structure going above. So parking, the economics of parking certainly needs to be a separate study, probably, but I do think the urban renewal plan, if it was adopted for the town center, would be the mechanism to help pay for the lion's share of the public investment in parking, plus have potentially funding left over for the gap in transportation and storm. So it really could be helpful.
And I think of underground parking because we don't have, and they're two totally different things, but we don't have power lines for a reason either. And it's all underground. We put a lot of stuff underground. Partially aesthetics, partially like livability and space and limitations within a suburban community. For a number of reasons, we've kind of been ahead of the game on that. So I just thought of how other communities have found a way to do it. But yeah, I agree with my other counselors here about kind of the challenges about not seeing that integrated within the plan.
Well, given the level of questions and concern on parking, it might make some sense to advance the parking study as a near-term project.
Yeah, and I think we can certainly, as we look at that, that's been on our radar to start looking at. I think one of the things also on our radar is the state of what might be happening with sort of the relationship between minimum parking requirements and how we might be dealing with those going forward. And I think that's going to be an important data point for us to have as we move into that as well. I think there's an opportunity for us to get into some of that work before we end up with a finalized urban renewal plan. So thank you for that input.
We've kind of given a lot of discussion now on parking, and I realized that our topic tonight was really on the funding plan. So let's bring it back to the funding plan. I do have a funding plan question. On the table where there was the different evaluation criteria, you had a great slide, I think, that illustrated that. And you mentioned in the presentation that each of those metrics were weighted evenly, I believe, is what you said. But I'm curious, is there one criteria or metric that in your experience you have found to be critically important for the success, I guess, of it, producing what was intended, and reaching those goals of this beautiful town center area that we all are dreaming of. I was curious about that. And then I also had a question about, in the near action slides, you had things broken out, year 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. There we go, yes. So there's, on the short term, items 2 and 3 is to look at the transportation SDCs, the parks SDCs, and I think I very much agree that it's important we keep on top of our SDCs, because they're important. That money has to come from somewhere, for this new improvements that we're making to the city, and it's good if we are on top of those things. However, I'm also remembering from the work, or all of the details leading up to this slide, that there was considerable information about the gap for stormwater. So I was curious, why are we not looking at stormwater SDCs? Why is it just the transportation and parks? So maybe you could give some details on that as well.
Great questions. Thank you for those. I'll start with the last one first. With regard to stormwater SDCs, because we're not really increasing impervious surface area, we're actually probably decreasing it.
But even with the green streets?
Yeah, we're going to be probably decreasing impervious surface. We're going to replace pavement with
Oh, I see.
landscaping.
Yes, decreasing.
And
Yeah, okay.
that's going to result in kind of less of an impact on the system. And system development charges are all about paying for the impact on the system.
Right.
So the SDC may not be the viable way to pay for stormwater.
Okay, and that's where, in turn, then you're looking at that parking stall,
Exactly, some other
perhaps, or
way.
something.
And the reason we said maybe a charge on surface parking, not structured parking, so, because they add a lot of impervious surface runoff, and it could be a deterrent to property owners to build more surface parking.
I see.
That's one reason why we're thinking that way. And it might be an incentive for them to redevelop sooner as well. So there's some thought kind of in that. I don't want to go down the parking road now.
Sure, we've been there, right?
On the first question about the evaluation criteria, the ones that I think are probably the most important are market acceptance.
Okay.
And
Can we look at that chart again as we, thank you.
market acceptance, which is kind of the, over off to the right, third from total, second from total there. And long-term funding raised. Those are probably the two most telling, I think, in terms of what these funding techniques could do in the near term. Because if you have market acceptance and you know you're going to raise a lot of money, then the rest tends to work itself out.
Okay. Okay, and this chart is a nice illustration that we're looking at now for some of the potential recommendations that we look into further. So I'm looking at my fellow council members here and looking for reactions to staff, because that's one of our questions, that's one of our tasks tonight, correct? To look at these recommendations that are in front of us, if these are things that we should pursue researching more. Is that correct?
Correct. So essentially, this plan is a framework for work we will do going forward.
Exactly. This is kind of direction that we will investigate and flesh out. Yes?
Correct.
Okay.
With the addition of elevating parking as a major concern.
It's a hot topic for this
Hear
council.
about it all the time.
Okay. Okay, so, yeah.
And one other comment, I mean, I've always been a big fan of urban renewal, at least the way the city of Wilsonville has done it. And I should have mentioned this when Mr. Lorenzen was up here, but a lot of that is because of our commitment to working with the other taxing entities. And having been at the county level, where everybody hates the county on urban renewal, because they've done such a poor job of it, it's entirely different. The taxing entities, I have been at hearings at the legislature where the other taxing entities, the school district, the fire district, are saying, actually testified, if everyone did urban renewal like Wilsonville, we wouldn't have a problem with it. But they're down there trying to get legislation to control entities like Clackamas County, and wishing everyone did it like Wilsonville. So I don't want to not mention that that's a big reason why our urban renewal has been successful, is how closely we work with those other taxing entities to get there. Even before it was legislated that you had to do that, we were doing that. And
Excellent.
so that's an important part of what has made me a fan of at least Wilsonville's urban renewal that we operate.
Okay, good. Looking at the rest of council, I appreciate this presentation. I appreciate the recommendations. For my part, I think that this is something that we should pursue as we look at seeing this incredible plan for our town center, a very exciting plan, seeing a path that it can come to fruition. So thank you for your work on this, and we look forward to hearing more.
Agreed.
Can I say one other thing? I didn't realize we had a skate park planned right in the middle of there, but that would be excellent.
Yes, that has been in the Parks and Rec master plan for a while, and so we made sure to really to highlight
to
that
have it
as
there.
part of our
I think that's an
green space
excellent
network.
idea also, because because there was discussion when we opened this one that the new one would be down where the dog park was, which I didn't think was a very good idea, and I always thought town center would be a better location. And and surely we can have a skate park that's at least as good as Sherwood's.
Okay. On that note, we will we'll continue in the future, and thank you very much. And I will welcome, let's see, Ms. Bateshell to the front here, as we will next be talking about Frog Pond East and South Master Plan. And this item will wind up our work session here. We have 30 minutes scheduled, and it appears we are about 40 minutes before the beginning of our normal meeting, so we will try and stay on task. Here. Oh, and I'll also mention, as you're pulling your presentation up, I'll vibe for a little bit here, that, you know, we have a mighty 3-member council this evening, but we all did receive an email from staff prior to this evening's meeting, opening up opportunity for one-on-one meeting and feedback sessions and input and opportunity, as this is an important topic that we've been talking about for a while now. So this has been something that all have been welcomed to get clarification before this evening's meeting, and also to provide input or feedback if you're not able to be here tonight.
Great. Thank you, Council President Ackerval and members of the council. My name is Miranda Bateshell. I'm the planning director for the city of Wilsonville. I have Joe Dills with me here this evening with MIG Consultants. And as you know, Mr. Pauly is the project manager for this project. I'm here in his stead this evening and hopefully can do him justice because he is at home on parental leave with his newborn baby girl. So yes, we're all very excited for him. And so hopefully hopefully I can carry the torch tonight. So as you know, we are nearing adoption for the master plan. Our target is the end of this year. The project team wanted to make sure we had a focused work session with the council on housing, given the council's interest in the topic generally, with affordable housing in the region, as some of you were talking about earlier this evening, and that you have specific outcomes and policy objectives that you've articulated throughout this process as it relates to housing in Frog Pond East and South. So some of the themes that we've heard is the importance of providing more affordable housing choices, and particularly for first-time homebuyers. We've heard that overall housing variety is really important because there's a range of needs in our community at different stages of people's lives, and so we need to really be providing a lot of choices. And then also providing accessible options for those who have limited mobility. And so those are some of the key outcomes and themes we have heard discussed. There's a variety of approaches and actions that are needed to achieve those things, so policy and regulations in our zoning code won't be enough. But zoning for housing variety is one small piece of the puzzle and is an important one. So while House Bill 2001 makes sure that variety is offered and allowed, it does not ensure variety is built. And that's something we've really heard from all of you is an important outcome of this master planning area. So the team has developed a draft approach to residential policies in East and South that would help to ensure variety and further the council's desired outcomes. And so our primary objective tonight here with you is to get your feedback on the policy direction we've been working on related to that and its integration into the master plan. We also are going to talk to you about the commercial area, but that is the primary topic for tonight. So with that, I will hand it over to Joe.
Thanks, Miranda. Good evening, members of the council. If we could go to the first slide, please. I'll also do my best to fill Dan's shoes here. As we mentioned, our topic tonight is to look at policies for residential and commercial. Most of the slides are residential, as you saw from your packet. And really the question is, are these on the right track, or do you have your own thoughts and guidance for how we ought to steer them moving forward? Next slide, please. As Miranda mentioned, we are seeking to conclude the master plan adoption by the end of the year, of course, subject to how the public hearings go and so on. But these are the steps. Just to point out a few of them, we would be back to you on November 7th for a work session on the entirety of the draft master plan, and assuming that the Planning Commission concludes its public hearing and recommendation in November, then December is when your public hearing would open. And maybe just to put a fine point on, this is all about the master plan itself, which of course is an amendment to the Wilsonville Comprehensive Plan, and the implementing development code and its own funding plan and other implementing actions would be follow-up work in the next year. A bit of backdrop to housing. Whenever we talk about housing, we have to be anticipating and planning for clear and objective standards, meaning that there is no discretion in housing proposals that are brought forward, at least in a path that would allow for housing to be approved using clear and objective standards. But that is coupled with a discretionary path that the applicant can choose to get some more flexibility and look at some innovations that may not be in the actual letter of the code itself. Both of those operate in Wilsonville today, but it's on our minds as we move into Frog Pond. So first, a set of residential policies here. The first is to allow the full spectrum of housing types in Frog Pond East and South, those that are listed here. These are not all allowed in Frog Pond West, at least they have some limitations. Multi-family housing is specifically excluded in that particular area, but the approach to Frog Pond East and South is to start with the list of all of the housing types. The second strategy here is to require minimum densities in east and south. That's a tried and true standard that is used in all residential districts in Wilsonville and has been for many years, and we would do the east and south version of that as well. Next slide. One of our new innovations is the map that we've been showing you for some months, which is the urban form map. And I'm going to say a little bit more on the next slide, but fundamentally what the colors here do is establish how tall, how wide, how closely spaced buildings are throughout the neighborhoods, with the intent of creating a very walkable, livable place with this variety of housing. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about the colors themselves. In other zoning districts around the city, the colors typically indicate what type of housing can be built in a particular high, medium, or low residential district. In Frog Pond East and South, it will be more about, like I mentioned a moment ago, the development standards, what the buildings look like and what they feel like. Density will only really be controlled by the minimum density requirements we have and the practicalities of what kind of building a particular area is constructing. So the urban form map is an important part of the residential policy and the strategies. The brown areas on the map indicate where the buildings would be tallest, closest together, most compact urban form. The gold color is slightly less, wider setbacks between buildings, a little more frontage, smaller buildings overall, and then transecting out to the yellow color on the plan. So, one of the things that approach yields is variety at what we call the neighborhood scale. So on the left-hand part of the slide here is the east neighborhood and how variety would be distributed according to the colors and urban form plan on the map. And then the picture on the right is a clip from Villebois, where, of course, under the master developer kind of environment, it was all very specifically down to the quarter block and the turn of the ends of the blocks and so on. That will come out in development review, and some of the standards will address variety at the block level. But in the east and south environment, where we have maybe 10, 15 different development reviews over time, with different developers coming forward, we're crafting the standards so it would work individually and incrementally over time, as opposed to a single master developer. Okay, so moving from those three strategies, let's go to how variety would be implemented a little bit more specifically. The outcomes intended are what we've been talking with you over the months: variety throughout the neighborhoods, the integration of affordable choices, and then this transect from more compact to less compact development form throughout the neighborhoods. There's three steps that would be used. So the first is to categorize housing units into types, and I'll show you a diagram of that in a moment. And then establish some minimums per area, and then a few rules about the percentages of maximum and minimum throughout the neighborhoods. So let's start with housing types. Why would we categorize housing types? It's to provide sort of a tool or buckets of the housing that applicants can choose from that work towards the types of housing that the city wants within these neighborhoods. And this is one of the ways in which we can get at one of your priorities, which is to provide for that market rate affordability somewhere in the 80 to 120% of median family income, that first-time home buyer, or maybe second, that's looking for a little bit more affordable unit, and certainly more affordable than you see today in Frog Pond West. And it also helps us get at accessibility and some other objectives. We put the next slide into your packet to show just a very first cut at how the housing categories might be framed. In the gold on the left are the more attached housing forms. Those provide a path to affordability. In the green bubble in the middle, we have some things that start to get at accessibility and some specialized type of housing, cottages, accessory dwelling units, single ground floor living or multifamily that has an elevator in the building. And you can see the other types here. So we have a little ways to go on how these categories would frame up. And really, we're identifying the tool for you as part of the master plan set of tools that would be done. Next slide, please. So once we have the categories figured out, then we would establish a requirement for a minimum number of them per area. And in discussion with the Planning Commission, we've sort of refined the approach that for small properties, if you've got 2 acres or so, probably just one category, because that's what's practical for you. Maybe if you've got 3 or 4 acres, there's enough room to start to do 2 categories. But for the larger properties, then the requirement would go up, a minimum of 3, and it may even be higher. We have some testing to do and some work to do on the ground. But the idea here, you can see, is to tailor the variety that's required at a property level to small versus larger properties. Okay, and then finally, the residential approach would include a few rules about maximum nut area for any individual category. That's to make sure that you don't have too much in any one place. Or a minimum net area for certain categories to make sure that you can't just get by with having maybe like one duplex off in the corner. There has to be a meaningful amount of the additional categories. And then finally, a requirement for middle housing. So that's the residential approach and the variety approach. And just to summarize, there's really 3 strategies that I started with: full spectrum of housing, minimum densities, and the urban form map, and then how variety gets delivered, the categories of housing, the minimums per area, and then the rules about percentages. Let me just conclude with commercial here, and then we can go to your discussion. The plan includes a 2-block area that would be zoned for neighborhood scale commercial. It's at the west end of existing Brisbane Street, where it meets Stafford, and Brisbane would be extended into the east neighborhood. And so this cross-section of the street shows the intent for it to be a very walkable, vital, multi-story area that hopefully includes mixed use and commercial on the ground floor and housing above. And so we've looked at some of the dimensions of the street. That's what this diagram is about. And then next slide, if we could. Really, the questions are about flexibility of should there be allowance for single-story commercial, which is the most flexible end of the spectrum, or should there be a little bit more assertive statement by the city that it should be vertical mixed use in the area, or at least multi-story, which is where the Planning Commission ended in their discussion, supportive of that. And our beginning thinking is that the design standards would be based on the town center, but of course downsized and tailored to the Brisbane Main Street in the east neighborhood. So that's my rapid fire discussion of what we're thinking on these 2 policy areas. Thank you for your attention on that. We'll go ahead to discussion and answer any questions you have.
Great, thank you. Looking at my fellow counselors, they're probably thinking of all their questions, and so we're giving some response to here's our plan, right? Could we pull up those final couple?
Yeah, the residential summary
yes,
slides.
Exactly. So giving some reaction to that, and then you had the specific questions that really, to me, kind of read, how are we envisioning this commercial space are we talking about a one-story commercial development, or are we talking about mixed use kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
So these are the questions that we are to answer today. I'll go to Councilor West.
I see the Frog Pond as a little bit, maybe not as much as part of Villebois, but disconnected from the city center. It's on the city outskirts on the other side of the city of Villebois. In Villebois, we did the mixed use commercial on the bottom and residential on top, and it hasn't really worked for over a decade. A lot of vacancy. One of the big questions is Councilor West, one of my neighbors, is why can we still not have this or this? And in that Piazza area, I know we're still developing that out, and hopefully that will help. A couple thoughts is this a lot different than what happened over in Villebois? And if so, how? And then is it also being considered as like live workspaces where you could live in that space and also have, I don't know, your shop, your business, or your commercial space at the same time. So there's like a fluidity within that lower level to still even accommodate residential if somebody wanted to have a space that accommodated, like I work from home, or I have a home business, or different parts of industry that are becoming more and more common now. I guess those are my two thoughts, is I want to understand better how it's different than what happened in Villebois, and then if it can be a little more innovative with what we're seeing now with live workspaces.
Okay. The live-work discussion has come up a little bit at Planning Commission, and thinking back to that, there was openness to it. So I think, I'm going from memory here, but the discussion to date has been positive towards live-work. It's certainly compatible with the overall concept. On the what's different about Frog Pond Commercial versus Villebois, there really are not stark differences, to be honest. These smaller neighborhood centers are difficult to get to go from the traditional market perspective. One difference is you do have Stafford Road, which carries more traffic, more visibility, the kinds of things that the lenders and so on are looking for commercial. But I'm being realistic here about the fundamental market characteristics are similar. We have done the homework to indicate that the market support within about a half-mile radius is pretty good and would support, we think, about 40,000 square feet over time. But again, it's under the small neighborhood commercial model, which is at the more challenging end of the spectrum.
And Councilor Lehan.
Yes, can I respond to that? Having been a part of the 1995 Damish Area Master Plan that was launched to do Villebois with David Leland, he told us from the get-go that the only way to make that work, really be successful as neighborhood commercial, would be to reroute twos through and take it all the way down to Wilsonville Road through Graham Oaks. That twos needed to go down there, and he drew a plan for it, for how twos would come through Villebois and go to Wilsonville Road, and where Boone's Ferry School is now. And that gave everyone heartburn, see? We didn't want to do it. And so even though as a commercial developer and a person who did commercial developments all over the place, all over the West Coast, he is giving us his best opinion, but we knew going in it would be a struggle. It doesn't have the traffic. And we knew that already, having failed with Charbonneau, where the village center in Charbonneau is buried so far that even people who live in Charbonneau have a hard time finding it. And Charbonneau should have been the village center should have been right up there at Miley Road. So at least the people going home to Charbonneau would be going by the commercial. I think this is entirely different in Frog Pond because of Stafford Road. And it means that, because at Villebois, just like Charbonneau, the only people who are going to see it are the people who live in Villebois, or the people who live in Charbonneau will see the village center, or you're going to somebody's house in Charbonneau. But Stafford, because of the Stafford traffic, now you get to pick up people who live in Meadows, who live in Landover, who live all the way into certainly all of the east side of Wilsonville, Courtside, et cetera. They're coming down Stafford Road. And or they're going out Stafford Road, whatever. But there's a lot of traffic down Stafford Road that does not live in Frog Pond. And that's what you have to have. You either have to have a lot of density, a lot of rooftops, what we're trying to do at Town Center, or you have to have a big road that goes somewhere, not just to that neighborhood. And that's why Charbonneau and Villebois are both, I don't want to say failures, but take a lot of support. They take a lot of effort to hold them up. I think this has a lot of potential to do neighborhood commercial that gets the outside support that it needs to be viable. And I'm not a planner.
Disclosure, asterisk.
Yeah, last.
Yeah. I guess my question would be, we're all going to think about Villebois because it's an example that's in Wilsonville, that we're all familiar with. What we've seen in Villebois, and it's been years, right? But some of those housing units around that area haven't been there until most recently, and even some of, they're in the works. So that kind of goes back to the density of, or the how many people do you have that are living within, a couple hundred yards of this shop or something like that. And if we're looking at a one level versus a mixed use, where you have units directly above, to me, my thought would be that if we have more units closer to that store, it's going to benefit that store to have that immediate customer that is right there. Is that an accurate thought? If we're thinking, how can we give this commercial area the best chance, something like that mixed use where you have more very immediate customers, is that something that would help?
Yeah, and the plan has been crafted to do exactly that. So the minimum densities that are embedded in the plan are highest, closest to the Main Street. In our transportation component of the plan, not only do we have a very walkable environment, but we have the routing of the smart bus to come up Wilsonville, get to the school, go 60th, and come around out Brisbane. Mm-hmm. So there's that element as well. So every piece of support for the Main Street that can be thought of in this plan so far has been put in the plan to help build up its success. You can't rely too much on what you're hearing from applicants as they come in, but there has been some discussion with the developers in the area that is encouraging on some fronts for mixed use and for certainly for the density of housing around the center. So everything that, all of those strategies are being put into place.
I guess that's why I'm a little surprised by this question, tonight of, are we talking about a one-story commercial or are we talking about mixed use? Because I think, I agree, I think that's what's, at least has been in my mind, and, in the last several months as we've been talking about this.
As the Planning Commission.
Yeah, it sounds like they are also in favor of having this mixed use. So, to me, I guess I'm a little surprised by the question, but I think that is the direction that I envisioned us going, and I'm looking at my fellow counselors here, and they're nodding as well. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Quick question.
Yeah, Councilor West.
I really appreciate the historical background regarding Villebois. I think that is unique and applicable. I look at Villebois, and it is pretty dense for a suburban community, all different types of housing, and it's pretty much built out. We're talking about a couple more lots around the piazza are left, but it's pretty much done. And those little storefronts still struggle. We do not have a main thoroughfare of traffic going by there. We don't. But when I see the parallels in Charbonneau, and then when I look at Frog Pond, I'm just curious. What is there a formula that says you need to have X many number of units to support this type of commercial housing? This is the level of density we need to better ensure, because I look at Villebois, it's already kind of dense. Is there like a special formula, like, well, we can only fit this much here, but our people are going to go mad, but we really need twice as much in that same space to be able to really support commercial? Like, where's that kind of balance for 40,000 square feet of commercial?
There's two factors involved, and we've looked at both of them. One is the spending power within not only a couple of blocks, but about a half-mile area. And so that gets you over to Canyon Creek kind of area and takes in the adjacent neighborhoods. That's what got to the 40,000 plus. So positive, looking at the amount of spending power within existing plus new development in that ring. Secondly, the housing density close to the Main Street is what creates the vitality, and also helps kind of creates the creating an address factor of this new Main Street getting known in the community. And the densities that are being planned in the east neighborhood are at about Villebois, if you take all the variety and average it out together. So good numbers, good kind of intent behind those factors to support the Main Street.
And wouldn't drive-by traffic also impact the viability of commercial?
Huge factor, as has been said. So you've got the local development plus the drive-by is the whole approach.
That's what I was going to ask, is I would presume any commercial developer is going to ask about the traffic counts on Stafford, right?
Yes.
They will want to know. Do we know those offhand, what the traffic counts are now, understanding they change?
I believe, Zach, we've done traffic counts out on Stafford pretty recently, haven't we?
Yeah, with every
Yeah, so we do have that data that we could share.
Yeah.
Follow up, I don't know the numbers off the
Don't
top.
know it offhand, yeah. Then my last question is about requiring minimum densities. It seemed to me with Villebois, it was a matter of, we had a target number of dwelling units overall, as opposed to a minimum density. And yes, it was still from the center out and less dense out at the edges, but I just wonder about the language of requiring minimum densities, since
Yeah.
density gets to be a hot button word as opposed to number of dwelling units, because that's what we're trying to do, is provide more housing, and we want it. And the whole notion, it's not really we want this much density as it is that we need this many dwelling units of these various types in order to carry everything, in order to carry the commercial, in order to carry the infrastructure, in order to whatever. So we've got a target of this many dwelling units. We couldn't do it with only 15 dwelling units, obviously. So I just would question describing it in that way. But
Fair point, actually. The more accurate way to put it is the minimum number of dwelling units.
right.
The rounded, it's 1,600 is what we have estimated. And that number has been used for infrastructure planning. In fact, we've added a little additional to it to make sure that there is sort of what-if capacity for more housing. But the number would be implemented. The strategy in the master plan would say that minimum number of dwelling units must be provided per area.
Right.
And then in the code, that would be brought to a sub-district level or even a property level. So it's very clear to applicants what their number is for their geographic area. And it's
And
all
I
tied
think
to
for the
infrastructure.
general public, they can relate to it easier than they can, well, the density here is 3 to 5 units, and over here it's 6 to 10 units and to the acre, and you don't really hold that in your mind. The way you do, we need this many units in order to carry.
Yeah,
what
thank you
we're-
for the question. I mean, it's actually the more accurate way of phrasing it.
So comment. Okay, I'm looking at my fellow counselors. Any other reaction to the variety policy summary, things like that? Looks like people are pretty happy with this. So we appreciate the presentation tonight, and
Before you gavel us out of work session.
yes.
And while I have Mr. Namsu here, who has information on the Kinsman Oak that
Oh, good.
we need to
Okay.
report on, so I would ask him to come up before you gavel us out, and unless
Great.
you have further questions of Mr. Dills and Ms. Batesshell.
No, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Great.
Good evening, Council President Ockervall, members of the City Council. I'm Chris Namsu. I'm the city's Community Development Director. And I wanted to share quickly, we are beginning to receive some of the findings about some of the analysis that has been done on the Kinsman white oak tree. There have been a series of site visits from the project arborist, Morgan Holen, who is somebody that we work with very, very closely. Morgan is top shelf arborist in the entire Portland metropolitan area, and she's worked with us extensively on every phase of Villebois. We know her very well. She's an outstanding professional. They climbed the tree. They had professionals from Bartlett Tree Services climb the tree and collect leaf samples, twig samples, and root samples, as well as soil samples. All of those samples have been sent off to Bartlett's tree lab. They have a tree laboratory. Bartlett is a professional arborist company that has tree climbers, tree cutters. When we cable oak trees together with cabling to hold the canopies together, Bartlett is the company that does the vast majority of that type of work. They are a highly specialized arborist company that takes Morgan's recommendations and implements them through professional climbers and practitioners who are also arborists. So the draft report, we're starting to get information. There is a wide variety of things that are happening to the tree. And I've jotted down a list of things that are covered in the draft memo. Once this memo is finalized, we'll be getting that to the council. We'll get all the analysis from all the arborist analysis, all the lab results, and we will get a comprehensive set of recommendations for what we can do collectively between the property owner and the city to try to address this laundry list of things that are going on at the tree. So what we have happening includes several things. I'm sorry, just give me 1 second to find my notes from this morning. The pH of the soil is slightly alkaline, so it's not in the optimal range for a white oak tree. It's slightly outside of that range, not drastically, but ever so slightly. So we have an issue with the soil that we can address through soil amendments. There are several insects that were found in the canopy of the tree. Some of them are pretty common, some of them a little less so common. There are wasps, which are common in oaks. You see the wasp gall that we find on the oak trees or on the ground underneath oak trees. That's a little nest, and they're kind of a symbiotic relationship between the wasps and the oak trees, and that's fairly common. There's a species of lace bug. I don't know as much about lace bugs, but that was identified, as were ambrosia beetles. And there's some question about these ambrosia beetles, whether it's the local species or an invasive species, because the invasive species will attack, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on ambrosia beetles, but I'm learning very quickly, they will attack live wood versus the native species, which is more inclined to find harbor in a dead wood or a log. So if we have the invasive species and it's boring into live wood, that could be a different set of challenges than the other species. There's also powdery mildew found on the tree, which is a fungal type of a thing that doesn't appear to be the cause of this particular problem. And we also have Phytophthora, which is a root fungus that was found in the tree. Again, not completely out of the ordinary to have a root fungus found in a species like this. The conclusion is that all of these elements together are causing the tree stress. And if you add the ice event of 2021, if you add Superdome heat 116 in June of 2021, so they're just 4 months apart from each other, some of the worst ice we've ever seen and some of the heaviest heat this area has ever seen, and you put on top of that the wettest spring in 2022 that was ever recorded, we have a combination of things that appear to be causing the tree stress from multiple different directions and multiple different angles. So if you thought being a tree was easy, it's not. There's a lot of stuff coming at you. And the good news, I guess, from my perspective, Councillor Lehan particularly, because I know how much we're tree people, we care deeply about these things, is that the tree may be in decline, but I see that there may be multiple paths to trying to work towards keeping the tree alive, keeping the tree healthy, and we can take all the steps that we need to make that investment in this beautiful tree that's an identified feature in our landscape.
Chris, can you also identify the boring issue with the big pipe?
Yeah, so the pipe, the 66-inch pipe is going underneath the tree as was described in the work session that we had when Andrew Barrett was here. He's the water supply project manager. The recommendations have all been looked at, Brian. They've all been re-looked at because there was a set of original recommendations that came, earlier in the year before we observed this kind of crown dieback. So, we wanted to make sure, if nothing else, that these recommendations that they had come up with were going to be good going forward. The report confirms in multiple ways that all the recommendations that they have come up with are good recommendations. Morgan went as far as following up with somebody at Bartlett Tree Labs who's a doctor, very prominent doctor. The report talks about taproots on oak trees. Kind of think of a taproot in a young oak tree. It may go down several feet. In an extraordinary circumstance, you may have a taproot that is 5 or 7 feet deep, but they grow very young, and then the horizontal branches, the roots take kind of dominance, and that taproot is much less important. The confirmation that was needed was that at 18 feet below, from the top of the pipe to the bottom of the tree, is over 18 feet. So the conclusion is that there's absolutely no concern about the taproot, and her tree protection zone is 40 feet on all sides. So if you imagine 40 feet to the north, there's a receiving pit that's beyond the 40 feet. So again, she felt really good about all of her recommendations on the tree protection zone and the depth of the pipe going under. She got the confirmation from this doctor at Bartlett Labs that those were sound and solid recommendations. So everything that is in the draft report looks like the boring is being done the appropriate way and should have no negative impact on the tree, and the mitigation is all kind of follow-up.
So I just have a question about that. It never really concerned me about the boring, but what concerns me about oaks generally is a change, and you didn't really address it there, but Morgan perhaps has in the past, is a change in the water regime. And, oaks tend to be very adaptable, as you know. They can live in practically swamps, and they can live in very dry areas, but they hate change. And so if it always was boggy in the spring, they're good with that. If it's roasting dry, but you change it, it's why Progress has. That's Progress, right?
Yes, pulled all the grass out, right?
Pulled all the grass out and didn't irrigate from the get-go because they didn't want to change the water regime under that oak. And so that was my concern with the big pipe project is even some distance away, did it change the water regime? Was there a spring or a other water thing that now no longer goes that direction or has drained away in a different way? Anyway, changed the wetness either more or less because they are sensitive in either direction.
Yeah, interestingly, I can add this to the comments that I'll be providing on the draft memo. So I'm happy to pick that up, put it in the memo, get it back to them for final publication of the memo, and I'm happy to include comments along those lines. The interesting fact about the change in the water regime was actually that it has gotten so hot here that it's getting too hot even for white oak. That's kind of the observation, is that our summers are just getting too long, and that as adaptable as they are, they're having trouble with this prolonged period of drought. So a recommendation that we could see would be Progress should irrigate this thing starting in October, because it's just, they need rain in October. That's what they're used to.
They're waiting for rain in October.
Right. So I thought that was really interesting, but you're absolutely correct about the water regime both ways. But the trend line with our just regular climate is it's just getting too hot.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for that report.
Thank you.
We are a tree city, and so these matters are really important. However, we will be a little delayed starting our 7 p.m. meeting now because everybody does good work when you can stand up every 2 hours or so. So we'll be taking 5 minutes in between our work session, which will adjourn now at 7:01, and we'll reconvene at, let's say, 7:06 for the regular meeting. So my apologies, and thanks for your Okay, I'd like to call to order the October 17th, 2022 council meeting. Request a roll call from the city recorder.
Councillor West.
Here.
Councillor Lehan.
Here.
Council President Ockervall.
Here.
And Councillor Linville and Mayor Fitzgerald are excused.
And like to welcome you all to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And do I have a motion on the order of agenda?
Your Honor, I move to approve the following order of agenda.
I will second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. And welcome. Good evening. Mayor Fitzgerald is unavailable to chair tonight's meeting, so I have that task. And I appreciate everyone's grace as we move through the meeting this evening. First off, I would like to acknowledge that today, Monday, October 17th, is the 34th anniversary of the signing of the agreement of our sister city relationship with Kitakata, Japan. And this was originally established in 1988. The sister city organization evolved into a city-sponsored program in 2000 with the establishment of the Wilsonville Kitakata Sister City Advisory Board. And coming up in December, so in just 2 months, Wilsonville community members will be hosting a Japanese high school student and teacher delegation, so several high school students, from Kitakata for our annual exchange program. And we're very excited to welcome them back to Wilsonville, as we haven't been able to do this exchange for the last couple years. So that's something that we're all looking forward to. Other announcements that we have. Let's see, a couple recent activities that I have to report on. A number of us were able, and a number of staff as well, were able to attend the League of Oregon Cities annual conference in Bend. And again, this was the first time in a couple years that we were able to all get together in person for that conference. And this conference really offers some good networking opportunities and opportunities to hear from other elected city leaders and city staff. There's several city managers, city attorneys that are also there, and hear about what's happening in their cities, in their communities, what's working well, exchange ideas, and learn from each other. So I appreciated that opportunity in those few days that we had together. We also heard from a number of different people, including the U.S. Senator Ron Wyden, who gave one of the speeches on our final day there at the conference. And a couple of the workshops that I was able to attend during that week, during those 3 days that really stood out to me was a tour of affordable housing options in Bend, which we've been talking about already a lot this evening, where we were able to travel around to the different sites in the city. And Bend is known for having actually quite a lot of affordable housing that's been in the works in that city for a while. Both rental and home ownership opportunities. So we were able to see a couple different cottage home properties, some of them multi-level, some of them single-level. So kind of the different variety that we're talking about here in Wilsonville too, having these different options for our community members and having options that fit the needs of the community members. So that was great to see and learn a bit more about how those came to be, what different tools were necessary in order for those projects to be realized. Also attended a workshop on community engagement. And that was fun, and gave me some things to think about. We recently had a draft of kind of how in Wilsonville we want to approach community engagement. What's the focus here in Wilsonville? And when talking with other cities, I actually felt quite proud of what we've been able to articulate and put forward, and the type of engagement that we have seen in the city. And of course, that's a partnership. It's city staff, it's city council, but it's certainly community members showing up to share what they think too. So I felt very grateful for Wilsonville, and came away with some other ideas on what we can do in the future too to make that even more robust. So. Unfortunately, the Regional Water Providers Consortium Board meeting occurred at the same time as that LOC conference. So I was unable to attend that, but in lieu, city staff has informed us that the city of Scappoose was proposed as a non-regional member of the organization. And there was also presentations on an emergency drinking water framework plan and 5-year strategic plan. However, Councilor West may have.
I did not get to go either. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say.
Neither one of us were available.
You could jump in there for some comments too. Okay, this last week, I attended the 30th anniversary event for Clackamas Community College Wilsonville campus, and heard Dr. Tim Cook speak, and also the president of Clackamas Community College, and also board member Aaron Woods spoke about the history of Clackamas Community College and in Wilsonville, and plans for the future, what they vision for the future. And Clackamas Community College Wilsonville campus has grown and evolved a lot over the last 30 years. 30 years. I was actually kind of surprised to learn 30 years of them being in Wilsonville. But it primarily started out with this focus on power line workers for PGE, a training place, and Pacific Corp. But the campus now has become much more integrated component of the overall community college and our community as well. And a number of different subjects are taught, including apprenticeship programs, advanced training skills, technical training areas, and general education courses are also offered at Wilsonville Clackamas Community College. So students can obtain specific educational certificates or associate's degree, or earn credits that transfer to four-year college, and obtain a bachelor's degree. And they really are a great resource for Wilsonville, for our community. We're very happy to have them part of our city. Earlier today, I attended a meeting with Washington County Coordinating Committee, and we heard an update on the county's major street transportation improvement program, which is commonly known as MSTIP. MSTIP. So projects in District 3 of Washington County, which is the district that Wilsonville is part of, that is probably of most interest to the city, include the Basalt Creek Parkway and Boone's Ferry Road. And at the time of the presentation earlier today, refined kind of cost estimates, public engagement results also were being presented. And then finally, we heard from TriMet regarding the draft of their Forward Together plan that is to improve regional transit service. And I did comment and recommend that TriMet consider engaging other regional transit providers like SMART, our fabulous SMART that we're very, very proud of, and the other local transportation management associations, other providers, so that we can really create a Forward Together plan. So that's something that I hope we will see. And And upcoming, a few things. Let's see, more LOC trainings. LOC is the League of Oregon Cities. We're trying to avoid our use of acronyms here. But League of Oregon Cities, I will be attending tomorrow a training on justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's an all-day workshop sponsored by the League of Oregon Cities. And of course, this is really fundamental to our work in serving all of our community members. And the second workshop is looking at issues, I believe that's the following week, next week, looking at issues around homelessness and how communities can better respond. And we recently had a presentation by our city attorney on some things that we're going to be looking at in the coming months with our code that is required now from state law that we look at some of these things. And so that was one way that I thought I can better educate myself for that discussion that we will have coming up as well. I'll be talking about that. And finally, the next city council meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 7th at 7 p.m. And I'm quite looking forward to our next item here under communications. We have a presentation about STARS camp recognition. Let's see, our camera's flipping around here. We are going to hear about the City Parks and Recreation Department's STARS Day Camp that was held this last August. So I am inviting Elsie and Gabby, two students that created this summer camp program, as well as member of our Parks and Rec staff here to provide an overview of the program and share some information with us.
Yes,
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Erica Baylor. I am the Recreation Coordinator for your Parks and Rec Department, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Gabby Mayos and Elise Smith. These two, back in, I think, late May, early June, came into our offices and said, we want to run a free camp for free. And that was like, what? We hadn't really done this before. It wasn't really, something I don't think Parks and Rec, at least in my experience, had really sort of dabbled in, running camps with local students, which was just a really cool idea. And props to these two for coming in and kind of having that passion and energy to put that on our plate. It was a really cool thing to happen. So the day camp happened August 11th of this past year. It was just one day, maybe potential to grow in the future. They had 27 kids enrolled, which is really great. 7 to 11 years old. Parks and Rec sort of helped just with the oversight of the camp. We held it in one of our local parks at the River Shelter. And I'm going to turn it over to them to sort of tell you how it went and what they did.
So during the school year, we came up with the idea of a free summer camp for kids who could not afford summer activities. We thought it would be a good way to give back to our community, and we really wanted to do something that would give all kids in our community a fun summer experience, not just those who could afford it. We know summers can be hard on some families because of kids being home and needing childcare. We also wanted to give the kids a fun opportunity they may not have because of how expensive summer camps can be, especially since COVID, when prices seem to have gone up exponentially.
Yeah, so we thought the idea of a free summer camp could also give the parents a day to get things done and not have to worry about childcare and providing lunch for their kids, while also providing a fun day for the kids. After sitting down for a while and thinking about it, we went to the Parks and Rec office to propose our idea and see if they had a space that we could have the camp at. And so they decided that they would be generous enough to partner with us, which was amazing. And we learned a lot from Erica through this whole process. And it was a great experience for us and all the volunteers that we had, and also the kids as well.
This summer was sort of like a pilot program for one day, which gave us the opportunity to experiment with different types of projects, activities to do with the kids. We learned a lot about the appropriate level of difficulty and length of activities. Length of time of activities should be to keep the kids engaged and having fun. With what we learned, we would like to expand the camp to a week, Monday through Thursday, or something similar next summer, and offer a wider variety of experiences for kids. We've thought of creating a theme for each day, for example, a cultural day, sports day, art day, and more.
What inspired us most to continue with this camp is that we saw the firsthand need in our community to have this. There were kids who didn't even have like a home to go to, and we saw the importance of this free lunch that the Parks and Rec provided us with, and the need for new resources. And so one of the things that we would want to do next year is provide t-shirts for the campers, maybe with our logo on it, or tie-dye, something fun for the kids. And yeah, and it was just very clear that the community has a lot of kids and parents who could benefit from this, and that it would be a fun thing to do and a good contribution to our community.
We can't thank Parks and Rec enough for giving us so many resources and guidance to make this happen. We really appreciate it and know that the families that attended do as well. If you have any questions, we're happy to discuss the camp in more detail.
I have a question.
Great. It looks like I'm muted. Some of our council members do have questions. Thank you for your presentation. Councilor Lehan.
So how did kids find out about this? How did you come up with 27 kids? Or did you have to turn anyone away? Or
Well, we advertised, and Erica put it on the Parks and Rec website.
Okay. So that was how people found it, was there?
And we had a ratio of counselors to kids, so we knew based off how many counselors we had, how many kids we could accept into the camp, and we ended up having everyone be able to be accepted in.
Oh, well, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent planning.
It is excellent. It does. It sounds like very excellent planning, the whole thing. And I'm so pleased that you have plans for next year as well, that this was something that you enjoyed and you see potential for growth even next year, which I'm curious, your students then yourselves in Wilsonville, is that correct?
Yes.
What class are they in?
Yeah.
Sophomores.
You're sophomores. I'm thinking, how long do we get them, right? I mean, that's the big question, right? So a couple more summers, maybe, possibly, are under your belt here, and then maybe part of future planning also can be how can this continue? How can you really plant a seed that will continue? With maybe passing things on to some of your staff or some of your volunteers so that they can continue things into future summers too. And then you can come back as a special guest one of the days or something like this. I don't know. Do you have any questions for our guests?
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, it's really awesome and impressive. What was the age group that you guys were focused on with the youth?
Mm-hmm. Well, our age group was 7 to 11, but in next year and in future years, we hope to be able to serve more age groups.
Were most of the volunteers part of Wilsonville High School?
Yeah, most of them were high school students.
And how many high school students partner with you guys?
We had 4 others.
4 of you guys?
4 others. Well, I think 6 in total.
6 in total? Awesome. I think that you guys embody what makes local communities so important, and local communities don't thrive without people like you engaging in it. You were talking about it earlier, how we're ahead of some cities in our local communities just doing things that are important to shape and form the community that you guys want, and you're doing it at a young age. And, you probably helped change some kids' life, or at least their summer, right? They'll remember that really fun day that you guys gave them. And please continue to engage and civics and in your community, and we'd love to hear from you guys in the future. I'm sure I speak for the rest of you guys. We're very, very impressed, and thank you for what you did for our community.
Thank you so much.
Maybe you should have a T-shirt design contest for next year.
Could I ask that the council maybe, because we have our communications director, we could take a picture with you two, and maybe Erica and the city council, anywhere out here is fine, so that we can plaster your faces on the Boone's Ferry Messenger.
And share about this good work you've been doing. Thank you. Yeah.
Hey. Do you want to go out? You want to come out? Do you want to come out here?
The thing there above it is kind of...
Oh, okay.
Let's just move the chairs out of the way.
There we go.
The next redesign will have like a selfie chamber. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Moms want to get in there?
Thank you.
Good job, guys. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, that was excellent. And like Councilor West said, it's a great example of seeing a need in the community and just making it happen. So thank you to our community members, and thank you to staff for working and helping coordinate that opportunity, and sounds like provide a little mentorship along the way too. So it's very special. Okay, and so this brings us to citizen input and community announcements. And I'm curious if we have anyone in the audience here or on Zoom who wishes to provide public testimony. If there's any, do we have anybody on Zoom? No. Okay, so we will move on to Councilor comments, liaison reports, and meeting announcements. And we will start with Councilor Lehan.
I was going to say, just skip that Ackerval person.
Yeah, we'll skip me. I've already spoken.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about
Mostly what I have been involved in for the last couple of weeks is getting ready for the State Cemetery Commission, who are coming to Wilsonville for their first in-person meeting since the pandemic. And I sent an invite out to the council, but it's on Thursday and Friday that they will be here. And Thursday, there will be a meeting at the Toffman House, and that's at 1 o'clock. Everything they do is open to the public, and so you're invited if you want to see this is the Oregon Commission on Historic Cemeteries. And then on Friday at 9:30, there will be a tour of Pleasant View Cemetery, and I will be doing the tour, and then there will be a GPR guy there, which is ground penetrating radar, and he will be doing some demos of ground penetrating radar in a cemetery where you actually don't see skeletons laying in there in the picture. No, but he will describe what he does see and what shows on the machine and what you can learn for places where you suspect there may be burials but aren't sure, that sort of thing. So that will take place also. That's at 9:30 in the morning, and the GPR demo is at 10:30 in the morning at Pleasant View Cemetery. everyone is invited. Certainly, if you have not been to Pleasant View Cemetery, this is an excellent time, assuming that it doesn't rain, because I know it hasn't rained in, I don't know, years, but it appears it might rain on Friday or Saturday. So anyway, but nonetheless, we will have our tour and a lot of interesting information for cemeteries generally and for our cemetery in particular. So we've been doing a lot to get it ready over the last couple of weeks for this visit. So these are people from around the state who will be here. The Cemetery Commission's made up of people from all over Oregon. So that's, and the only other thing I was going to mention in terms of coming up things is the Harvest Festival, or unless somebody else already had that, because I don't know what else to say about it, except that it's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 22nd at the Steinbruger Barn. So it's always a big hit. Again, assuming it's not pouring down rain, but that would be so unusual.
You could just incorporate an umbrella into your costume in some way.
Yes, there will be pumpkins and many things, hay rides and stuff like that. So it's a fall festival.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And Councilor West.
You know it's, and you know you're in Oregon, especially in the metro area, when we're like a little fond and missing our drizzle and our grayness and our rain. But some of us are. I think some of us are ready for some of the rainy weather to come. I don't have much to report. I could not make it to LOC this cycle, which was a huge bummer. Really wanted to go, but I had to cancel and couldn't make it. And then I also, for the same reasons, couldn't make it to the WIF thing, but I know they'll have, I think in next year, well, the water consortium.
Oh, you mean the regional one?
The regional one?
Yeah, WIF is actually, I think, at the end of this month, but
the regional water consortium, yeah. I think next will be next year, but yeah, so I couldn't make it to those. However, I wanted to make sure people did know about a couple events coming up in Wilsonville. Was a sensitive document destroy thing is coming up in November. The Shred Northwest Portland is here at City Hall is going to shred your personal documents. So if you've been holding on to this recyclable sensitive material and you don't want to throw it into the recycling bin, make sure you show up on November 19th. It's a Saturday. You can go, I think Boone's Ferry Messenger has that information, or the social media for the city does, but that's a great event. And then before that, on November 5th, it was similar, but a little bit different, is the Leaf Drop Day. That's also at City Hall. City Hall's very busy, isn't it? We just do all things for all people here. So leaf drop shredding, making sure that you're doing fall cleaning, maybe, not spring cleaning. You can do that here at City Hall on those two events. The Harvest Festival, I'm going to give a few more details. It is at the Steinbruger Barn. It is on Friday. It's on Saturday, October 22nd. It looks like it's free to the whole entire community, so it looks like a lot of fun. And it's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And there's going to be a band. The band is the W Lovers at the Harvest Festival. And there will be lots of fun activities like face painting and a costume parade. I'm totally going to that. And a roaming magician from the Portland Party Works. We will give away pumpkins and crafts. And let's see, what do you say? Pumpkins and crafts, we'll say in crafts. And there'll be a performance from the Innovative Dance Company, which is a local dance company over by Old Town. So they'll do a performance that's pretty cool. And we'll enjoy story time with our Wilsonville Library staff. And donuts and coffee from Divine Mini Donuts are available for purchase. Lots of local community businesses are participating, which is fantastic. Bring your little ghouls and goblins all dressed up for the festival. And it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe some adults will dress up too and enjoying the fun, but good family event. Hopefully you won't need too much rain gear with your costume, but yeah, that's coming up and is a really cool annual thing we do.
Probably scary stories.
But luckily it'll be broad daylight, so we'll all be able to sleep well that night. Okay, Thank you. And moving on, let's see, will the city attorney please read the consent agenda?
Resolution 2998, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Wilsonville pertaining to short-term subordinate urban renewal debt for the year 2000 Plan District for the purpose of funding the construction of capital improvement project by the agency. Resolution number 3002, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to enter into the First Amendment to Communications Facility ground lease with Clackamas 800 Radio Group for the use of city-owned property on Level C Reservoir Parcel as a wireless communication facility tower site. Resolution number 3003, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Consor North America, Inc. to provide engineering consulting services for the Beckman Creek Interceptor and Trail Project, capital improvement project numbers 2107 and number 9150. Resolution number 3006, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a construction and funding agreement with Portland and Western Railroad, Inc. for the reconstruction of a grade crossing at the 5th Street Railroad crossing associated with the 5th Street Kinsman Road Extension Project, and minutes of the October 3, 2022 City Council meeting.
Excellent.
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
I will second it.
Any discussion? Then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Then the consent agenda is passed 3-0. And now I will ask the city attorney to read the resolution title. Let's see, well, I guess that's kind of skipping ahead. I'll detail that there is no new business and no continuing business, so we are on to our public hearing, and I will ask the city attorney to read the resolution title.
Resolution number 2999, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing a supplemental budget adjustment for fiscal year 2022-23.
Thank you. So tonight we'll have this public hearing to consider resolution number 2999. And the order of procedure for tonight's hearing is set out in detail in our city code. But in brief, we will start with a staff report. And next, the public will be asked to provide testimony. And then I will ask for everyone who signed up in advance to testify first in order in which they've signed up. And then I'll ask anyone present in the council chambers who would like to testify. And then I'll ask anyone who is on the Zoom meeting who has not testified but would like to testify for them to do so. And then for those in the audience just now, please fill out a speaker card and provide it to the city recorder. And for those that are participating on Zoom, on the web, you can go to zoom.us and click Join a Meeting. You enter webinar ID number 815-3605-6768. And you can please use the raise hand feature if you would like to speak. Or you can call 1-669-900-6833 and use webinar ID, again, 815-3605-6468, and press *9 if you would like to speak. Or, there's so many options. You can email city recorder at ci.wilsonville.or.us. And when you begin your testimony, please state your name and address for the record. Or you can state that your address is provided to staff. And after each person testifies, counselors may pose questions to be addressed by the person who testified or to staff to clarify any information that was conveyed in the testimony. And once City Council has heard from everyone and the City Council is satisfied that it has all the information it needs to render a decision, public hearing will be closed, Council deliberates, and I will announce the result. So we do wish to hear from everyone who wants to testify. That is why we have all the different options. However, we request that you refrain from repeating testimony that has already been given by someone else. So if you agree with what someone before you has said, please provide your testimony indicating that you concur with what has previously been said. And public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes for each person. We will time the testimony and provide you with a visual warning when there's 1 minute remaining. So that's our order of procedure, and now the public hearing is now open. And I'll welcome Catherine Smith, Assistant Finance Director, to provide staff's presentation.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Smith, the city's Assistant Finance Director. As a budgetary housekeeping item before you this evening is a budget supplemental. Notice of this public hearing was published in the Wilsonville Spokesman on October 5th and October 12th. The total budget supplemental is $7.8 million. The majority of this, $6 million, is unused capital improvement project funds from last year that we're requesting to roll forward to the current year, plus $250,000 in unused capital equipment dollars from last year that we're also requesting to roll over to the current year. The balance of $1.5 million is for new requests, and some of these include the Emerald Ash Borer mitigation, Villa Bois Parks, 5th and Kinsman Railroad reconstruction, and a pumping system modification for the standby generator for the water treatment plant. Additional supporting documentation is included in the staff report within your council packet. And we also have with us tonight staff who are happy to take any additional questions you may have.
Excellent. Do any counselors have questions for staff at this time? They might need a moment to think about this. For public testimony, we can move to public testimony. We'll start with the people who signed up in advance to testify. However, I do not have a list, so I assume that we didn't have anybody that signed up in advance. Do we have anybody in the room that wishes to testify? And then do we have anybody on Zoom that wishes to testify?
Even
okay.
With all those options?
Or the phone. We had the phone option as well. And we have nobody on the phone that wishes to testify. Okay. So I'll ask if any counselors need anything clarified regarding the information that we have been provided both in our packet and from the presentation tonight. Okay. Well, let's see, we've moved through a number of bullets on my agenda here. Any clarification, anything like this? Okay, then I think we can go down. Staff has nothing further to add since we haven't had any robust comments here on this, but
no rebuttal necessary.
Like you have detailed, we've been provided with all of this information, both in packet form and tonight, an opportunity to ask questions. So, hearing no questions and that we've given opportunity for everyone to testify, I hereby declare this public hearing closed at 7:46. And it's now time for the council to consider resolution number 2999. So is there a motion on resolution number
Your Honor, I move to adopt resolution number 2999.
I will second.
Excellent. So it has been moved by Councillor Lehan and seconded by Councillor West to approve resolution number 2999. Now, is there any discussion? So hearing no further discussion or commentary, I will now call for the vote on the motion. So those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. And those abstaining. The motion passes 3-0. But we have followed all of the steps.
Leave out any steps.
Okay, and that is it then for the public hearing, correct? So we will move to, well, we have no other formal business on tonight's agenda. So we will move to the city manager's business. Is there?
Item that I have, we actually took care of in work session.
Okay, with the tree, the white oak. Thank you for that. Is there any legal business?
Just wanted to let the council know that I will be out of the office next week, but Mr. Adams will be available to the extent anything comes up.
Okay. Excellent. So then our October 17th, 2022 council meeting is adjourned at 7:48 p.m.
Yay.
Do we? I think we do. But we're actually going to stick around and probably just move right into our Urban Renewal Agency meeting, if that is good with you all. So I'd like to call to order the October 17th, 2022 Urban Renewal Agency meeting and request a roll call from the city recorder.
Member West.
Present.
Member Lehan.
Present.
Vice Chair Ockervall.
Present.
Chair Fitzgerald and Member Linville are excused.
Excellent. Okay. Do I have a motion on the order of agenda?
Your Honor, I move to approve the order of agenda.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. And that brings us to citizen input and community announcements again. Is there anyone in the audience or on Zoom that wishes to provide public comment? No. Okay, so we will move on. And will the city attorney please read the consent agenda?
URA Resolution Number 328, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville Urban Renewal Agency authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Wilsonville pertaining to short-term subordinate urban renewal debt for the year 2000 Plan District for the purpose of funding the construction of capital improvement project by the agency. URA Resolution Number 331, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville Urban Renewal Agency authorizing the city manager to execute a construction and funding agreement with Portland and Western Railroad, Inc. for the reconstruction of a grade crossing at the 5th Street Railroad crossing associated with the 5th Street Kinsman Road Extension Project, and minutes of the September 19, 2022 Urban Renewal Agency meeting.
Thank you. Can I get a motion on the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
And I will second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. And there is no new business or continuing business items. So that brings us to the public hearing again.
This is the resolution, URA Resolution Number 330, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville Urban Renewal Agency authorizing a supplemental budget adjustment for fiscal year 2022-23.
Okay, so tonight we will have a public hearing to consider URA Resolution Number 330. And we do, well, there was a slight chuckle, but we really do want to provide opportunity for everyone. So we will go through this process again, even though it sounds repetitive. So the order of procedure for tonight's hearing is set out in detail in our city code. And in brief, We will start with a staff report, and then the public will be asked to provide testimony. And I will ask everyone who signed up in advance to testify first in the order in which they signed up. And then I'll ask anyone present in council chambers that would like to testify, and I will ask anyone who is on the Zoom meeting who has not testified but would like to testify to do so. And for those in the audience, please fill out a speaker card and provide it to the city recorder. And for those participating on Zoom, on the web, you go to zoom.us and click join a meeting and enter webinar ID 815-3605-6468. And please use the raise hand feature if you would like to speak. Or you may call number 1-669-900-6833. And again, webinar ID number 815-3605-6468. And you press star 9 if you would like to speak. Or you may email city recorder at ci.wilsonville.or.us. And when you begin your testimony, please state your name and address for the record. Or you may state that your address is provided to staff. And after each person testifies, members may pose questions to be addressed by the person who testified or to staff to clarify any information that was conveyed in the testimony. And once the agency has heard from everyone and the Urban Renewal Agency is satisfied it has all the information it needs to render a decision, public hearing will be closed. The agency deliberates, and I will announce the result. So we wish to hear from everyone who wants to testify. However, we do request that you refrain from repeating testimony that was already given by someone else. If you agree with what someone before you has said, please provide your testimony indicating that you concur with what has previously been said. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and we will time the testimony and provide you with a visual warning when there is 1 minute remaining. The public hearing is now open. And I will welcome Catherine Smith, Assistant Finance Director, to please provide staff's presentation.
Good evening. Before you this evening is a budget supplemental. Notice of this public hearing was published in the Wilsonville Spokesman on October 5th and October 12th. The total budget supplemental is for $1.9 million, of which is comprised of unused capital improvement project funds from last year that we're requesting to roll forward to the current year. For the year 2000 Urban Renewal District, these projects include 5th and Kinsman Road Extension and the Beckman Dip Bridge. Additional supporting detail is included in the staff report within your packet. And we also have with us tonight staff who are happy to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So for public testimony, well, I guess first, do any of the members have questions of staff?
Well, since we, yes.
Excellent, excellent. Excellent. And I'll invite Member Lehan to pose her question.
Since we just had our presentation on our urban renewal things, are these are in existing urban renewal districts, correct?
Yes, this is the year 2000 urban renewal.
Okay, year 2000. So they are in the same urban renewal district, even though one's 5th and Kinsman and one's the Beckman Dip?
Yes.
But it's called the year 2000?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I was just curious of that. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so moving on, public testimony, we'll start with people who signed up in advance to testify. I do not have a list of people. We don't have anybody that signed up in advance. And I guess we just move along. Do we have anybody in the room? No, I have all of these questions and anybody on Zoom? No, okay. So no other comments or questions by either members or by staff? Okay. Hearing no further questions and having given everyone an opportunity to testify, I hereby declare this public hearing closed at 7:56 p.m.
Madam Chair, I move to approve URA Resolution Number 330.
I will second.
Excellent. It's been moved by Member Lehan and seconded by Member West to approve Resolution Number 330. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I have just a clarification, because in my packet it says Resolution 331.
Mine says 330.
Okay.
As does mine.
What's right?
And the resolution in my packet is also 331, so I think we need, am I looking at the wrong one? That was consent. Hey, guess what? Never mind. I had to,
I was afraid that we were going to have to veer from the script here, and it's like point 24, and I could never find point 2 if we had to go back.
I had the city attorney concerned.
That's right. Okay.
Never mind.
Just kidding.
Yeah, just kidding.
Hearing no further discussion or questions, then I will call for a vote on this motion. So those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed and those abstaining, the motion passes 3-0. And we do not have anything further for the meeting. So the October 17th, 2022 Urban Renewal Agency meeting is adjourned at 7:58 p.m.
Wow, good job.